I just learned some jazz today, it's true. You just learned some jazz today, and you.
What's up, everybody? It's Liz and Vince. You guys, today's episode, you are going to love it. Episode number 47, we had on Laurie Buckle, CEO and founder of CookIt Media. And if you're not familiar, whether you're a blogger, an influencer, or just a consumer that, follows people on Instagram, this is going to be a really cool behind the curtain look at influencers and brands and how they form their relationships and brand deals. Vince, what did you think of the episode today?
I mean, Laurie's a genius. I learned so much in this episode. Guys, stick towards the end. She breaks down some things for us, and I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but tune in.
Spoiler alert, Vince was dying to know how influencers get paid, that nosy guy. But no, I think you're going to all be interested. Again, like I said, this isn't just for bloggers or influencers or even brands that might be listening. Granted, if you are a brand or a blogger or an influencer, you must listen. But anybody that is influenced by people online, which, spoiler alert, we all are, you're going to find this super interesting about how those brand deals start. All right, enjoy the episode.
Some jazz today, and you gon' learn some jazz today, yes, you gon' learn, you gon' learn,
Yay! All right, everybody. It's episode 47. Vince, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm super geeked for this episode. We have a very special guest today, everyone. I know her very well, but I'm guessing a few of you don't, but you should. Her name is Laurie, and she's the owner of CookIt Media. Laurie, welcome to the Irie Lemon podcast.
Hi, guys. How are you? So happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. All right. For anyone that's not familiar with you and CookIt, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and CookIt Media?
Will do. Do you have a couple of hours? Just kidding. So we like to talk about ourselves as something of an outlier in the influencer marketing industry. For me, CookIt was very much the opportunity to better understand what was happening with influencers. And this goes back to 2013, if you can believe that. It was like the dark ages of what at that point in time were called bloggers and what they were doing. But I worked in food magazines for my whole career, Bon Appetit and Better Homes and Gardens. My dog is whining. I think she sees a squirrel, you guys. Okay, just wait.
Protecting you.
Oh my gosh, hang on. Anyway, coming back to like starting off in food magazines, at Bon Appetit and Better Homes and Gardens and Fine Cooking magazine, I've always been in the food space, and I'm just fascinated by the world of food. So obviously when the blogger community was really starting to kind of come to be something and be really interesting, I was sort of thinking to myself, wow, how do I get over there? Because I love magazines. I will always love magazines, but I really wanted to be where the ideas were. Do you know what I mean? Like the things that I was cooking off of blogs were completely different than the things I was cooking out of the magazines I was working for. And I was just like, wow, this is so much more interesting than what we're doing. So I finally just decided, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. And at that point in time, I was at Better Homes and Gardens, and I just kind of jumped ship and basically decided I was going to start at my own business. And I wasn't even sure how I was going to do it. I got lucky enough to meet a blogger whose name is Gabi Dalkin. She's What's Gabi Cooking. And I realized I had something there that I needed to kind of grab and hang on to. So I said to Gabi, I said, so I have this idea. Can you basically be a guinea pig for me? Can you help me understand where my experiences are valuable to you? Like where what I know about creating a brand and creating an audience and all of these things, can we work together for a while so that I can better understand where I come in? So we did that for, I was almost 2 years, I think. And it was so fun. And it was so interesting to kind of learn the inner workings of blogging. And at the same time, see the potential in it and watch Gabi go from a blogger to this brand, this California girl brand, and how that was working for her. And everything I learned there was really that process of, okay, I get it. This business needs to better see its potential in the marketplace. And we used to talk about how really CookIt was, we were devoted to helping bloggers become better businesses, to help them really get what their opportunity was and how to get there. And that was the root of who we were back in sort of 2013, 2014 when I first started. And it was great because it was just the the word was, I guess, spreading in terms of what do we do and how can we help you? And we had a lot of folks coming to us. I was sort of building a team at that point in time. Pretty quickly, it became obvious that the brands were also following these individuals who were growing and becoming really interesting sort of businesses in and of themselves. And some of the bloggers we were working with would come back to us and say, gosh, can you help me with these brands? Because I'm not really sure how to work with them, how to talk to them, how to price myself, like all of these things. And for me, obviously, having worked at magazines, especially when you're running a magazine, one pocket is basically your editorial team and all those people that you're working with in a creative capacity. And the other back pocket is your ad sales team. You are always right there with them, really working to help them understand what are you doing over here in your magazine so that they can do a better job of selling it. So for us, it was really this kind of natural shift towards, all right, let's work with influencers and brands and let's help them really figure out how can they work together and what does that look like. And that's really been the route since about 2015. That was really where everything kind of started to shift. So for the past 5 years, we've been in that space. We've been working with food brands and food influencers to really kind of establish what does this look like now? What do these partnerships look like? And how do we facilitate those?
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
No, good.
Let's, to those listening in, I feel like they're going to want to know when Gabi was your guinea pig, what did that actually look like? What were you actually doing over those 2 years for or with her?
That's such a good question. Remember when we could all like sit in the same room together or have coffee? It was.
Oh, I miss that so much.
There was a lot of that. We would meet regularly, like maybe once a week or something. And we would really work together on the things that she was working on at that moment in time. So if she was building out an editorial calendar, we'd focus on that for weeks on end and really figure out, okay, so here are all the things that you basically want to write about, want to talk to your audience about. How do we craft that into a strategy so that you aren't in a position of waking up on Monday and deciding what you're going to post that week and starting cooking and, recipe development and photography and foods, all that stuff that you guys do, so that it had real organization to it. So it was that back and forth consulting process of here's the question, how do we get to the answer?
That's so cool. I mean, I'm sure overnight you provided her with so much value.
Can I tell you back at her? Because I was learning from her at the same time. Like, how do you do this? Oh, let me tell you how we used to do it over here, because I think that can inform some of the ways you could do this going forward. So definitely mutually learning process.
Yeah, that's so smart. So do you have a question, Vince?
Yeah, I have a question. So from when you started to now, is the game, like, how big has the business has grown? Like, not individual years, but like the business of influencers and brands working together.
Almost indescribably. Do you know what I mean? It was in its infancy. I didn't know it then that it was in its infancy and it was becoming what it was going to be. And food bloggers like Liz, I mean, you've been around for what, 7, 8 years too?
11 years now.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. I mean, like really these folks that were pioneers in the industry and sort of they were the, the big players in the field. And over the years, I mean, it's so enormous out there. There are so many people who want to be food bloggers, who are food bloggers, who are trying to get into the business, who are trying to find their voice in the process. I'm kind of fascinated by it, and at the same time realizing that as an industry, it's going to have to start shifting. Not everybody can be the lemon bowl. Do you know what I mean? Not everyone can be pioneer woman. It's like these people that are coming up now, what do they have to learn from Liz and the folks that are there with you having, really being pioneers in this process? And how is the industry going to change to accommodate that number, but at the same time to realize not everybody's going to make it through this. Some of these people are, some of them are amazing photographers. They're going to go off and be the new version of what food photography is. Some of them are incredible writers. Same thing. It's going to kind of break apart a little bit, I think.
That's so true.
I like that answer.
Yeah. I love how you put that, because I think when people come to bloggers like myself, everyone wants to know how I did it or how they can do it. And I'm very aware that what I've done is, not something that is a really easy thing to replicate. And to your point, it's not to say that what they might do wouldn't be even better. But to your point, not every person that photographs what they eat is going to create a successful, large, profitable business.
Impossible, right?
Yeah.
There aren't enough people for
Right.
all the businesses effectively. And this happened in food magazines too. Like when I started in food magazines in the 80s, there were so many of them, and small ones and big ones and different topics. And you look back on that now, it's like, wow, that was a little bit of its own chaos. And it gradually distilled itself down to those that were really the most important in the conversations we were having about food and people's interests.
Okay. So what do you think is some of the differentiators between, from your experience, you've been in this business now over 5 years working in the real, larger capacity, but even longer with Gabi. What do you think is the differentiator between the people like Gabi and others that they have aspirations, but it just doesn't quite happen? What do you think, if you could narrow it down to like 3 or 4 different, whether it's personalities or habits or whatever it might be, differentiators of people that become successful food bloggers and people that aren't able to really launch it past a hobby?
Oh my gosh, I love that question so much. It takes entrepreneurship. It takes a business mind. It takes a deep sort of commitment to the individual you're working for, which is your reader. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really requires you to step out of your role effectively, that it can't be about you. Obviously it is about you. We live, sort of in a world of social media where it requires you to be front and center of your brand. But in many ways, magazines do too, right? Like editors were really important parts of what their brand was. But it needs to be the same thing. But there has to be this sense of, this is a business. This is how I'm going to run my business. This is my revenue strategy. Like all those things that, wouldn't you call yourself an entrepreneur? I would call both of you entrepreneurs, right? This is the way you look at what you do. It isn't a hobby. It'll never be a hobby again. Oh, it'll be a hobby for those people that want to just, share the recipes like the beginning, right? It started as a hobby.
Like I embraced that transition when it did transform from a hobby to a business, which was ironically in 2013.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I think a lot of people that I kind of came up with, rightly so, the minute it came out of hobby land into business land, they actually pushed away from it. And very intentionally not, doing things they want to do in other areas or focusing more on their families. They didn't want to be on, a schedule with a client or read through contracts or have to hire people or train people or fire people or send invoices. They didn't want to deal with the business side of it. And I think that you're right. That was something I think I actually enjoyed just as much as the cooking, which thank God, because I only cook 2 days a month now for the blog.
Wow.
So to go back a little bit, when I first met Liz, that was the thing I noticed about her, is that like, oh, she's an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so like a lot of people didn't understand like why I was like working with her or partnering with her. And it's just like, no, like the blog is like a business. This is not like some bored house like mom who's just, taking pictures of food. Like she's like a ninja in business. And I feel
she's a
like
machine.
yeah, right. And it's like, it's hard to, like, for example, I'm more introverted. Like it's hard for me to like post and be upfront and like tell all the time and then also run the business. Like I'm solely interested in running the business. I'm not really interested in like being the star. You know what I'm saying?
I
and
do
so,
know
like,
what you're saying. Yeah.
And so like
that used to be me.
right. And then there's some perks of being the star too, like Liz has shown me. But like, I was like, okay, that's hard. Like to and her brand is definitely more public. She shares her family, her husband, her kids on top of recipes. And I was like, okay, to do that every single day, to grow your brand, understand your customer, your reader, and then to attract big brands, but to also know how to run a business. And then also what's cool about Liz is that like she comes up with ideas. She's like knows how to like actually help the businesses on the end. It's not just here's a couple grand and I'll post about it. Right? Because like I feel like a lot of influencers who amass that following took that route. Like whatever they say, I'll do if the money is good. Right. And you see people
which is the worst possible thing you can do.
The worst possible thing to do. Because
it's like running over your brand with a train.
it destroys it. Like not all money is good money and not everything is great for your brand, especially on social media, especially with readers. Like that's like that community building thing is like the hardest thing to build. Right. And as an entrepreneur, like I know because
you just couldn't be more right, Vince. You are so right on.
Like, it's like I'm like, okay, that's a skill. Like most people like being a community builder is like a real skill. So any influencers listening right now, like you have that skill.
Everything you just said.
So about running your brand over with like you said. So why don't we get into that a little bit?
Sure.
I mean, because you obviously navigate both brands and influencers, and so you have two different. Like I have readers, you've got your clients, but you also have your influencers, your stakeholders. How do you navigate that balance of, making sure that an influencer isn't just taking the work for the money? Because obviously that's not good for the client.
Right. I love that question. It's a complicated question because of the industry itself. And Vince, you raised a lot of good points there too. I think the thing is that, it's really just what I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this. So Liz, like we were just saying, there are the two sides to the business, and a smart influencer has a really diverse revenue strategy, a really diverse business model. And working with brands is a part of it, right? It's probably maybe it's a third of it. But you're doing all kinds of other things. Obviously, you're building a site that has growth and expansion and a lot of traffic, and that's helping you. You're doing, ancillary products and things over here. Obviously, you're an amazing cookbook author, things like that, where you have a very diverse business model. But when you're working with brands, your allegiance to your readers really should never change. We were just, Vince, right before you hopped on, we were talking about creativity and how creativity is really the secret to a successful brand facing an audience that is requiring that of them every day. I didn't say that in the best possible way, but one of the things that CookIt has, really been learning in the kind of quiet of COVID is this idea of coming back to creativity in content is crucial to this industry, and it's crucial to each individual influencer. It's like when you here's the train wreck part, when you working with a brand and you hold up a bottle of something and you say, I really like this bottle of something, you should purchase it. You just lost what percentage of your audience did you just lose? Because in that case, you are not providing great ideas, great content. You're not providing that audience with what they're coming to you for, which is what you know about things. It's your expertise. It's the content that you create within that expertise that helps them become better at something, that solves their pain points, that does great things for them. And when you sacrifice that, whether it's just a single post, whatever it might be, and you sacrifice it to a lack of creativity, you effectively are doing yourself a disservice. And the brand is in the same boat. The brand is also needing to learn that it's the influencer who has the direct connection to that audience, who really knows them backwards and forwards and works every day to better understand them as they change. I mean, look at the change we've all gone through in the past 6 months, and watching influencers rise to that occasion and create ever better content that's helping people cook from their pantry, cook from their freezer, whatever it is, really realizing, wow, they're stuck over here. They're cooking 3 meals a day. They've got kids at home that they're trying to school. They got to clean the house, and they'd really like to take a bath. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're really having a hard time. And it's the influencers. This has really been kind of the inspiration for us, is watching these influencers do this amazing thing. And if the brands can begin to better understand that they need to let the influencers be the creatives in this conversation, be the direct connection to the reader, and if the brand can really partner creatively with the influencer, that's where we're going to see everything change, I think.
Oh yeah.
So on the brand side, when it comes to like payment and money, like how has that changed, and how have they priced working with influencers, like from small ones to big ones? I'm always interested in like how they come up with numbers and how they know what people are worth.
It's a conversation we have every day, all day long, to be honest with you. It is still the Wild West. I mean, I happen to love Las Vegas. Not everybody does. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when you walk up to a table and you decide how you're going to play that table, I swear influencer marketing feels a little bit that way. It's changing all the time, and people are prioritizing different platforms all the time. Like it wasn't very long ago that not too many people were over there in TikTok, right? And some influencers are saying to themselves, "Oh, it's not for me. I don't want to do that." And some of those people who made an alternate choice and are there right now in a big way are very glad they're there, because the value of TikTok obviously has increased exponentially over the past few months as the sort of everyone staying home, trying to find some entertainment, discovered TikTok. So it can change, the value can change with the platform. It can change with something as subjective as quality of content, which is really interesting. I think a lot of influencers, especially as they're kind of new to the industry, think that there's some magic rate card out there that they just haven't found yet. They're going to find it if they keep looking, but there is not. There is not a magic rate card. It's very much like advertising in terms of the industry is setting the value for the success of the content. So if you're a magazine with 7 million followers, subscribers, I can't believe I just said followers, then you know what I mean? Like you have a better chance of finding sort of success in that model simply because it's a scale play. If you're a very niche market magazine with, 25,000 subscribers, but you're talking to, say, a restaurant industry that has very specific needs for, sort of the content that you're providing, that's engagement, right? That's a different kind of audience. So all of those things come into play as we try to help influencers really figure out, okay, what is your value on this platform and this one with this kind of content or this kind of brand? It's Las Vegas every day.
What's up, guys? Subscribe. Tell your best friend, tell your mom, tell your neighbor, tell your 4-year-old kid. Please listen.
We appreciate you. And thank you so much for all of your 5-star reviews on Apple. That helps us get this podcast out to other people who will enjoy. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
And with that, enjoy the rest of the episode.
You gon' learn, you gon' learn.
Just to piggyback off of that from the influencer perspective, and I am, now 11 years in, so I feel like I really have.
Can I just say congratulations there? That's a survival skill.
I'm a little crazy. But I think that because the brands obviously do frequently ask me for rate cards, for example, or other people like events or anyone from outside of the industry, how do you make money? What do you charge? Da, 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 da. And I really think that when you look for a rate card as like a brand, you're limiting the value you can really extract from an influencer, because every influencer runs their business differently. And to your point, I do run a business. So the value I provide each client is going to vary based on what their goals are, their marketing objectives, how out of the box they want to be, what platforms they prioritize, what their budget is, what sort of timing they're working with, et cetera. And I think that if you landlock yourself to a rate sheet, you're really going to limit the opportunity and the value you can provide your clients, which in turn is limiting the value you're going to offer your readers.
That you said that so well, and it's such a complicated equation too. It's sort of and you're right, it has a lot to do with their goals as well. If they're interested in brand awareness, that's one kind of content, right? That's this particular kind of content that perhaps is easier to make than something else that's far more complicated that might tie to affiliate marketing or whatever it might be, where your role in that process is more complex and multi-layered and everything. So we try to look at it from all of those angles all the time, realizing that you have baseline things that have worked before, and so you always have those. So you kind of start there, and then, like you say, you begin building out. And if we did this, and if we did it for this amount of time, and if it looked like this, and if it was on this platform and that platform, what would that begin to look like? And then, of course, you get into, access to that content going forward and what that looks like, and contracts and all those things.
Exactly.
Laurie, I love the way you think. I think we share some DNA in like having strategy as our leader. Like a lot of people are like, what is it? And I'm always like, well, I have like a billion strategies. Like, what do you want to do? Right. And so my question to you is, when you do go talk to brands on the behalf of an influencer, do you go in with a plan, or you kind of wing it by just listening and hearing what people want? What's kind of like your flow?
I think a little bit of both. I kind of walk through the world that way in general, right? It's like, you can be strategic, you can be prepared, but you also have to be in the moment. You really have to be there, listening to the opportunity and figuring out exactly what it is and how you can really be helpful there too. I was telling Liz, one of the things that at CookIt, we've shifted toward this model more recently, where we are looking to educate brands about what's happening here. That there's kind of been this lull in really appreciating what an influencer can do for a brand as bigger and more brands come into this space. And I feel like it's my job every day to have these conversations with brands, but the conversations range from, a few months ago, we were really helping brands understand what could they have to say about what's happening? What would their position be in the conversation about what was happening in the world and in cooking and how that was changing? We were having that conversation. Now we're having the conversation about, all right, how do you create content for an unknown holiday season? Effectively unknown in that none of us is sure really who's going to be at our Thanksgiving table, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There might be two of us, and there might, who knows what's really going to happen. So realizing that the influencers are facing this same kind of great unknown of where we're going, how can influencers help brands move toward that opportunity, and what does that look like? I mean, I think we all know, for instance, that gift guides are going to always work. They're going to always be helpful to the audience, but it's going to be different this year. Not everybody's going to go to Bloomingdale's. Do you know what I mean? Not everyone's going to get out there on the streets. There's going to be a lot of, I think, online e-commerce is probably going to break the internet, from what I can tell. So it's really interesting as influencers are beginning to think about that strategy for themselves too. I mean, hopefully, Liz, like, you're already there, right? It's like, I think gift guide season starts in a week and a half or something. So it's that sort of process. It's like, what's happening in the moment? How can I help that brand? And how can I help that brand also get smarter about what this opportunity is?
Yeah. Note to self, get going on my gift guide. So you bring up such a great point about the unknown of the holiday. And I want to, going forward, what are your thoughts about the future of influencer marketing based on not just because of the pandemic, but just in general? What do you foresee? What are some of maybe the predictions of what you see happening in the marketplace?
That is my favorite question of the moment, because it's pretty much all I'm thinking about. Having sort of had these experiences in traditional print, and having, sort of now much more experience over here in what's happening in the digital space, watching what's happening to the advertising industry as a whole, watching those outlets go away, whether they're advertising in sports, in games and that kind of thing, or whether they're on billboards, places that people aren't going anymore. Traditional advertising is really it's losing its mojo, basically. And I think we're all having to figure out, well, where are the consumers? Where is the opportunity to influence them, to create sort of one-on-one word of mouth marketing that really is the only successful kind of advertising, if you think about it. So how do I help a brand realize that this is actually the future of advertising, that they might as well step away from their traditional model? It's just not going to work anymore. The world has moved on, and better understand how this works, because in many ways it is the future of advertising, but it's also completely different than advertising. It is, like we were saying, Liz, it's not basically an ad and a piece of paper in a magazine. It's a brand and an influencer trying to figure out how to come together in such a way that it really does benefit both of them. Come to the table together and understand sort of what's happening on the influencer side, what's happening on the brand side, what are their goals, and it's just what we were saying. It's that process of learning that together. And if CookIt can kind of set that table and get those people to sit down and have a glass of wine with us, do you know what I mean? And just kind of realize that there's a very human quality to this kind of advertising that I don't think has ever existed. And it's incredibly exciting. And at the same time, it's sort of like, wow, this has to change. And how are we going to facilitate that? And I think that the industry pretty quickly here. I think this holiday season really might be the kicker. It might be that point where they're like, wow, nothing's working over here on radio, nothing's working on TV. We better go talk to these influencers, because they are the ones who are in direct content with the people that we want to talk to.
Yeah, I think especially in a pandemic. I mean, I know when it first hit and everyone was sheltering in place, Vince knows his restaurant was shut down overnight. People were forced to cook at home around the clock. And now it was no longer just cooking for yourself. Your husband was suddenly home from work and your kids were home from school. I know I was cooking for 4 people 3 times a day, 7 days a week.
Not including snacks.
Don't get me started on snacks. And I love to cook and cook for a living, and I was overwhelmed. And I know how to cook, and I know what to do with the food I have left in hand. But
exactly. You have all the skills.
Right.
Unlike your readers, right?
I was overwhelmed. So that was just such a wake up to me that I had to be, basically someone that they could look at and be like, I'm also in the same situation. I don't have a house cleaner anymore. I don't have a babysitter anymore. I don't have teachers. We're in this together. Let me show you how I'm surviving. We'll do this together. And the benefit of an influencer versus a magazine or a commercial on TV is that we can adapt overnight.
Lifetime.
Literal
lifetime. And watching you guys do that has been so inspiring. Can I just tell you,
Thanks.
Amazing.
It's cool. Luckily, I guess maybe that's the entrepreneur side of me. I was so like excited and motivated and inspired and invigorated by it. Vince and I kind of laughed that he and I during the pandemic we almost like thrived because we love the challenge and the opportunity and like that sense of urgency to help and all and to adapt and pivot. And it definitely energized me in a weird way. But I definitely get off on helping people. And if there was ever a time where I was helpful, I mean, it was busier than 10 years of history and busier than any healthy living season, which
Wow.
that was the other weird thing is it wasn't just the January.
Right. Exactly. It was all the, well, it wasn't for, I feel like the first like maybe month to 6 weeks, everyone was like, oh, I'm just going to eat all of this and I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to indulge myself. And then all of a sudden everyone went wait, maybe we're in this for a little bit longer than we thought we were going to be. Maybe we should like, get a little healthy here. Yeah.
We're gonna have fun. And, oh wait, 3 months in, like maybe.
Right. All right.
Maybe eat some salads.
My jeans are not zipping.
It's so funny because when the pandemic hit, just like Liz, I was pretty excited. But also the first thing that went in my head, I was like, man, I'm in the wrong business, right? And I was like, God, like, but then, and obviously there's.
You wanted to be a blogger?
Well, not necessarily a blogger, but I was like, wow, like, because I think the stat came out that most retail businesses, especially restaurants, have 14 to 21 days of like cash, and they don't have that, they're out of business.
I know.
And so what we saw was a stoppage of business literally caused people to go out of business in the restaurant industry, and it showed me like how flawed we ran our businesses.
Oh,
and
interesting.
And Liz knows I always complained about it for like the 3 years. Like, yo, I just don't like how this system works, like the way a restaurant operates, because it's like it's such like a two-way marketplace where your customers are adapted to the way restaurants work. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to play in that system, right? Because that's how they buy food, right? And so when I was there, I was like, okay, like this is so hard to really scale and grow a restaurant without massive investment. Like every build out's $1 million to $2 million.
Yeah.
You need a whole staff. You need to do marketing. You need to do like the whole thing before you even start it. And then you got to get the customer, keep the customer, earn the customer over and over and over again. And then we hit pandemic and then you see, oh, wow, government says we can't open, be safe. And then people are out of business. And you're like, oh my God, we were so flawed. Like 14 days of cash, 21 days of cash isn't a smart way to run any business. Right. And so I was like, well, do you need $1 million build out? Like, do you need to be that big? And so it was funny to me because I didn't have all that. And I was like small and like my costs were low. And so people were like, how are you hanging in there? How are you making it happen? I'm like, dude, I have no expenses. Like, what are you talking about? I didn't build $1 million kitchen, like my kitchen's like 30 grand, and that was it.
And that's so smart.
Restaurants that didn't have like a content, they never thought social media was that important, or they weren't putting out regular content. To your point, they spent all that focus on making like a really cool bar build out or different things. I think this has definitely, shifted priorities. And even just like the restaurants that didn't have online ordering available or delivery available, that should have been done, to your point, a long time ago.
I think all that, I mean, there's so much in that, Vince, if you think about it, sort of that ability to flex, to change, to evolve with. I mean, that's something that influencers kind of live with every day too. But you're right. It is that, right? That business model isn't working. What's our plan B? And how do we be right there with our customer and what they need? It's almost like you guys are doing the same thing. And that mindset of, all right, I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to be smarter about this. I'm going to reduce this to 3 dishes that I do really well, or whatever it might be. But I hope there are more people like you in the restaurant industry who are going to help this thing rise back out of this, because I'm pretty worried about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty worried too. Well, I was going to ask a question. So my question is, what do you think restaurants should do with your understanding of like influencer marketing? Like, I have some ideas. I kind of feel like restaurants should start some way, some form, like blogging or sharing content and trying to build an online business instead of just being like foot traffic. So I'm going to ask you, like,
completely agree.
Like, what do you think about that?
I've always been kind of, the big story in restaurants and in sort of my experience has always been about chefs. Do you know what I mean? It's like this chef and this star chef, and they're doing this, and they're doing that kind of thing. When I've always thought it should be about the story of the place. It should be about the story about the food and why you're cooking that food and what what your readers, what your diners will experience when they get to try that food, and what they'll learn, and how that will expand their view of the world, whatever it might be. But it's like you come to your restaurant with a story, right? With a sense of what are we doing and why are we doing it and who are we doing it for? All that stuff that makes good story. And when you're creating that story in social, if you think about it, you're building a following. You're building a group of people who don't just want to come to the restaurant because you're a famous chef on television. They want to come to your restaurant to really try what it is that you're talking about, to have that experience. And that's a different kind of diner. I think that's a smarter diner. I had this one chef say to me once, he said, my problem is these diners who come to my restaurant and in August they insist on having asparagus. He says, I don't know what to do with these people. It's like they're coming, they're bringing, they're paying for this service. They expect asparagus. I don't want to make, obviously, asparagus in August kind of thing. So what do I do? And I think this is really a chance for you guys to change that diner, to make that diner more interested in the educational, experiential parts of what you're offering via, like you say, get out there and talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just interested what you thought about that, and you see the opportunity, because I've been playing in my brain like maybe we should at Irie like try to become a BuzzFeed, like maybe we try to do that, because the content is there. It's not going to be easy, but we're already cooking. Things are already happening.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to figure out a way like how can we as restaurant owners like build another business model. Right?
Yeah,
like
I hear you. Okay, this is a secret piece of information, but when I was at Bon Appetit for like 20 some odd years, and the entire time I was there was a column called RSVP, which ran in the front of the magazine, and it was basically recipes from restaurants. And readers, do you remember that? Everyone, it was always the most popular column, and people would write in and say, "Oh, I had this amazing salad. Can you get me the salad dressing?" You'd be like, "Really? You want the salad dressing?" But it is that thing, they want to replicate the experience. They have something that they really loved. They want to figure out how to bring that home. And you guys are sitting on a gold mine of that kind of content that rarely gets out there unless it's in a really hard to follow cookbook. Do you know what I mean? Instead of a great video where you're showing me exactly how you sear that steak or whatever it might be, so that I'm like, oh, I see, my pan wasn't hot enough. I'm learning something from you, whatever it is.
And so I'm just gonna go in and ask a lot of questions now. Okay, should that be free, or should that be like somebody pays a low dollar amount for, and you have like for like your super fans, or do you share that with the world?
I think both, to be honest with you. I think this is what influencers are up against too. A really smart influencer takes a brand that she loves and incorporates it into her lifestyle, right? Very organically. That thing is, maybe it's a granola and it's literally sitting on her counter every morning because that's what she has for breakfast every morning. And she does this with it and her kids love it and that kind of thing. So that when she gets around to partnering with that brand, there's already all this like evidence of a brand ambassador, effectively, of organic content that actually we have this third-party platform. It's amazing, where I can go in and look at an influencer's content that was organic and say to a brand, you have someone over here who loves you, loves your product, and look at the performance of this content. Look what's actually happening, how many bags of granola she sold this week, kind of thing. So I think it's like that. It's like understanding where you are in that process, what the potential of it is. It could start with free, 15-second videos that you put on TikTok about how to do something, but it could evolve into a cooking class scenario that you do online where people are just flocking. You have limited sort of audience opportunities there to watch you do something, right? To teach you, to show, and that's, you could definitely charge for. So it's kind of realizing where in there, where do you convert somebody from follower to, investor, effectively, consumer?
I have a question now. Now we've gotten like so big picture, which I love, but let's bring it back to CookIt. And can you tell us a bit, to any influencer or blogger that might be listening, how do you work with bloggers and influencers specifically? We've talked a lot about the brands. So I'm going to be selfish here and bring it back to my blogger colleagues that are listening. What pain point do you solve for bloggers, and how do you, if you can just get real micro with it, how do you work with bloggers?
We actually work with bloggers in 3 different ways. And this is part of that sort of new business model I was talking to you about, was that I need to better understand, I need to help brands better understand how do they work with influencers. So we kind of reshaped CookIt around that thinking. So we have an exclusive group of influencers that we work with in sort of almost like a talent management like way, where we're helping them day in and day out build a better business, basically. Really, that opportunity, it's kind of like almost partnering with a brand, with an influencer brand, to help her realize what her potential is. And that's a very small group. It's like we were saying, it's a very interesting kind of individual who's very entrepreneurial, very focused on the business of what she's doing. We also have a network of it's an invite-only network of influencers that we work with in what we call campaign strategy, so that we're helping brands. On that first side, that's helping brands understand what a true ambassador like situation, how that works. So it's not a single post opportunity. I feel like the single post thing has to go away immediately.
Please.
Oh my goodness, it's taking the industry down, and we're doing everything we can to make sure it's obsolete within a very short space of time. But then over here on the network side of what we're doing, we're collecting a group of influencers who have really a unique audience, a unique experience, a unique perspective, something that when a brand comes to us and says, I'd really like to talk to people in Grand Rapids, Michigan, who like to buy organic products and have 2 kids, preferably under the age of 5. And we're like, okay, I think we can do that kind of thing. So it's finding those people who have these really interesting audiences that brands often need to speak to, very intentionally need to speak to. And then we also, on what we call the content agency side of what we do, we work with influencers as content creators, because brands desperately need content. They need custom content that they can use to build their own brand story. Do you know what I mean? It's like the best situation is that a brand comes to the table with a great brand story and a great sense of who they are and why they do what they do, and the influencer comes to the table with exactly the same set of skills. So when I can help a brand better know sort of who are they and what are they doing and why are they doing it and who are they doing it for, all those things that are sort of the foundation of a brand, I'm helping that brand realize, okay, now I can explain that to the influencer I'd like to work with, because she needs to know that in order to be successful in the partnership as well. So it's really those 3 different ways.
That's cool. And are you looking for, do you have openings for new bloggers to join? And if so, how would they learn more about CookIt?
On our website, there's a space there where you can just click, and there's a form that you can fill out. But we are always looking, because the industry is always changing. I'm always excited to meet new people who are coming to it with a new perspective, who very likely have learned something that I haven't learned because they're on the ground with it, who see an opportunity for themselves that they haven't quite yet figured out how to do, whether that's a very specific audience, whatever it might be, that maybe we can help them with that. But always happy to talk to people. It's one of my favorite things about the job. I miss all the conferences and everything, all those great connections. And I know.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Laurie. I feel like this was just super. I just love talking to like-minded, enthusiastic people like
Back
yourself.
at you guys.
And yeah, we'll definitely have in the show notes listed links to CookIt. I'm assuming, are you on Instagram? Where can people connect with you on social media?
Yes, we're at CookIt Media on Instagram, and we're to be honest, we're really fun over there. We take a really educational approach to our content on Instagram too, and in our stories, and really kind of trying to be a support for influencers. We're also obviously on LinkedIn. I think that's the best way. Website is just cookit-media.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been so great to talk with you.
Great to talk to you too. Thanks, everybody.
Laurie, thanks for coming on the podcast. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laurie. It was so good to connect with you, and I can't wait for everybody to tune in.
You're gonna learn this jazz too. And yes, you're going to learn this jazz. Ooh, I even taught your girl some jazz yesterday. True. No, I'm just playing.